The Devil's Chord, or as I like to call it, Taylor Swift's latest album, was the episode of Doctor Who I was most sceptical about. Whenever Doctor Who does a wacky idea, it's always 50-50 on whether it's going to be good or not. I was excited for the main villain, as I have liked what Russell is doing with the gods. But, was it any good? To start with, this episode is one of the best visually pleasing episodes of Doctor Who. There's tons of visual style throughout. I don't think I was ever bored whilst watching it. The editing is a massive improvement from the last week's episode. Russell must have hidden the editor's stash of Monster Energy drink. We have a nice transition at the start of the episode. Shots linger on, letting you actually appreciate what's going on in each one. I could actually tell what was happening throughout the episode. This shouldn't be a novelty, but oftentimes in Doctor Who, they just throw footage through a blender and hope for the best. It's lucky the editing is on point because the camera work in this episode slaps harder than a companion's mum. The tuning fork POV is a standout, but it's not my favourite. The episode is staged like you'd stage theatre. Gee, I wonder why. A lot of wide shots of characters just existing in the same shot together. I love shots like this. It feels cluttered with people just as real life does. It makes the world feel full and alive. They could have just done shot reverse shot like most episodes and no one would have batted an eye. Me included. This episode makes good use of wide shots throughout. I think that famous Beatles picture served as inspiration on how this episode should look. Like how they used Van Gogh's paintings for shots in Vincent and the Doctor. There's a cinematic shot of Shooty looking out over London from the roof whilst Ruby plays a piano. They didn't even need to put the piano on the roof in the episode. But they did it. Because, well, pretty. The musical number at the end probably does it best. Which is a shame because I hate it. The costumes are great too. This episode is a week old, but if you asked me to draw the costumes from memory, I reckon I'd get it spot on. You never lose track of which character you're looking at thanks to the use of colour. Shots are crammed with people, but they all have distinct colour or colour combinations. There's a good chance they use it as foreshadowing too, as Maestro and Ruby share the same black and white colour combination. The main theory on Ruby at the minute is that she is connected to the pantheon of gods. If true, then Maestro sharing her colour scheme is a good hint to that. I mean, that being said, Maestro sports a blue outfit at the end, much like the Doctor's, so maybe he's a god. Maybe everyone's a god. Speaking of gods, Maestro is the first Russell original god in the series, and they are an amazing villain. Jinx Monsoon is eating this role alive. They just ooze presence whenever they're on screen. Every movement and line delivery gives off a bratty theatre kid whose parents doll them out for attention. Maestro is a child of the Toymaker but holds different powers. Toymaker was games, making him more of a game maker than a toy maker, and Maestro's is music. Their powers are a little vague. They can rip music from people, cause everyone to write shit songs, and force people to sing. You think this is how they justify the musical number, but Maestro is gone by the time we get there, so, whatevs. The Doctor is severely outclassed in this episode, and he knows it too. When Maestro first enters with the giggle, from the giggle, he freaks the fuck out. The fight with the Toymaker scared the hell out of him, and he tells Ruby that he was ripped in half last time he fought a god. And he even cries. Well, he cries in one shot, then isn't crying in another shot, and then is crying again in another one. They definitely mashed up takes together where Shooty made different choices with his performance. Unfortunate, since it dragged me out of the scene. It's not a huge deal, but I'll never not notice it now. 15 has cried a lot, to be honest, and he's only had 3 episodes. I'm of the theory that the Doctor's next regeneration is a correction from the last's mistakes. Since the last 14 Doctors bottled up their emotions to the point it literally ripped him in half, it makes sense to me that 15 is more emotional. He does still struggle with talking about his feelings though. He tells Ruby about Susan since her and the first Doctor would have been in 1963 at that time. He doesn't know if she's dead or not after the destruction of the Time Lords. When Ruby hugs him, he just laughs it off like he doesn't know how to fix the awkward tension in the situation. Speaking of Ruby though, she really doesn't have a lot going on in this episode. She is falling into that Clara trap of only being interesting because she's a plot device. There's only one moment where Millie actually has to work for a living, and it's when they go to the future to see the world has been destroyed from the lack of music, and that her mummy's dead. And then that's it. You see a quick moment of her crying and reacting to this situation, and then they plough straight on with the plot. Her only real moment of characterisation is when she plays the piano so that they can find out what happened to the music. They call it back to the church on Ruby Road when she played piano at the pub, so music is a consistent character trait for her. The tune she plays is her own theme. Her theme being something she wrote does characterise her a bit. The theme has a hint of sadness with moments of hope in it. A theme can tell us a lot about a character. In this case, it tells us there's an underlying sadness in her life that's broken up by occasional moments of hope. Her writing the song tells us that on some level, she knows this too, not just the audience. It's the only moment a character for her, and it's the only time her musical ear really plays a part in this story. She just barely does more than the Beatles do in this episode. Oh yeah, the Beatles are in this. That's it. If you want a character analysis on them, you'll have to consult the wiki. The episode was advertised as a Beatles episode, but all they really do is kick off the story as Ruby wants to see the Beatles record their first album. So they go to Abbey Road in 1963 to watch them play, only to find the songs sound as good as a wet fart in a bin bag. It's not just the Beatles, all music in the world has had the soul sucked out of it. If the Doctor and Ruby don't figure out what's wrong, the world will end. Somehow. Okay, so I'm being a bit unfair. The Doctor does say that without music, there's no way to express a broken heart or pain, so the world goes to war. All musical geniuses are reduced to SoundCloud artists in this version. It's a very Disney-esque plot. I get that the world-ending threat plays better for stakes, but the episode could have just been the Doctor trying to fix the music so that the world has music. I'd be invested in that. I wouldn't want to live in a world without good music. A world without this banger? Kill me now. In order to save the world, the Doctor must take on Maestro in a music battle and find the lost chord to banish them from existence. My biggest concern with Doctor Who introducing gods was that they wouldn't feel like a threat after a while. The Doctor beats most of his threats by flicking buttons. To do that with a god would undermine how big of a threat they are. Russell balances them out though with the rules of fair play established by the Toymaker. He had to follow the rules of the game, meaning that you can justifiably beat him using his own powers against him. The threat being, if you lose, you'll have a fate worse than death. Maestro was brought into the world after Timotei played the lost chord, so they can be banished by the same chord. As easy as it sounds, it takes a musical genius to figure out what the chord is, and 15 ain't no 12, let me tell you. They try and justify the Beatles' existence in the story. Like, they come in, see a random piano in a corridor, and they play the chord that defeats the Maestro. It's so random. They didn't even know about Maestro or that playing the chord would banish them. It's complete happenstance. The climax feels rushed like last week's. They would have had the screen time too if they didn't fart around with the ending. Before Maestro vanishes, they warn us that he who waits is almost here. 14 seasons of Doctor Who later, I'm a little tired of the mystery boxes now. If you cut that line out the episode, it doesn't change anything. It just tells us what we already knew. There's a big bad. He's a-coming. They already teased him earlier in the episode. Maestro tries to rip Ruby's song from her soul only to see that there's something wrong with her. They sense he who waits presence on her. This was more effective as a tease because it plays into the story and Maestro's abilities. We even get more teases on Ruby not being human as Maestro refers to her as this creature. It's similar to the tease at the end of last episode when the Doctor scans Ruby. And like that scene, we don't learn anything new. It's just more ball tickling from Russell, but given the show has been doing this since its revival, it's more like ball crushing. Ruby doesn't react to this either. Her parents are untraceable, she meets a time traveller, and then a literal god freaked out by her. And for 2 episodes in a row, Ruby has reminded us about Disney's hand in Doctor Who by making it snow. The bitch has the powers of Elsa, and despite this, she has no reaction. She doesn't start questioning her origins more, the Doctor doesn't question them either, they just plough on so they can have a twist at the end. Ruby is a tool for a mystery that they are saving for later. Because they're saving it, it means her and the Doctor can't question where she's from. Because if they did start to question where she's from, the next logical course of action would be to investigate it, which would lead us to the end game before the show wants us to get there. You can learn a lot about a character from their reaction to information. Ruby has mysterious origins, she can create asbestos, and yet to her, it's like it didn't happen. They have to deny Ruby characterization so they can have a twist at the end. Speaking of twists at the end, there's an actress who has been popping up since The Wild Blue Yonder. It's in small roles each time, and there's nothing linking them together as far as I can tell. Her scene in Wild Blue Yonder, she doesn't even meet the Doctor. In Space Babies, she's on a monitor. So, who is she? Well, the episode has a mention of Susan that comes out of nowhere, and it has a twist at the end. The actress's name is Susan Twist. Now, would Russell hire an actress just because her legal name works as a mystery box? I mean, he might. Though I do get serious Secret Fourth Sherlock episode flashbacks. It's odd that we have an old woman in Mrs. Flood who has mystery surrounding her, and now we have another one. I don't know. I suppose time will tell how that plays out. We'll just have to wait and see, like most things in this show. Alright, I've danced around it enough. Let's talk about what got the fandom in a big suck this week. The episode has a musical number at the end. The plot's wrapped up, so it isn't plot related. Maestro was defeated, so they're not responsible. It's weird, because on the one hand, everything about this number works. Every positive I'd have with this episode is on full display here. The editing, camera work, use of colour, the song is catchy and very 60s dance. It's all here, and it's all great, and yet I still hate it. The melody of the song is the same as the giggle, connecting it back to the gods. In the giggle, the Toymaker's domain lingered after he was defeated, and since Maestro hijacked music for years, there's an argument to be made that the twist at the end was everybody breaking from Maestro's grip, and their musical powers lingered long enough to create the musical sequence. There's established rules and even headcanon that can justify this musical number's existence, and I still don't like it. It's just so tacked on at the end and it comes out of nowhere. It feels so ashamed of itself, like it's saying to fans, if you don't like it, you can just turn it off. Episode's done. Go home. That rushed climax frustrates me more because they could have just scrapped the twist at the end and just had a big musical battle to defeat Maestro. They put a lot of effort into a musical number they didn't feel comfortable enough having during the main story, and so I just don't care for it. Also, I studied acting and had to do a musical in front of a paying audience despite not being able to sing. So, I swallow my musicals with a swill of vinegar. So, that was The Devil's Chord. I really liked it. Solid 6 out of 10. It's an episode that melds its own one-off story with a lot of setups for the mystery box, so depending on how that turns out, this episode will either become better or worse retroactively. There's a lot of good in this episode, but just a lot of moments that are frustrating. I won't say they're bad, but they are just frustrating. Like, Ruby not getting an awful lot of characterization this episode. It's frustrating, but we have more episodes coming up that might give her more character. If that's the case, then this episode won't be so bad in a future rewatch because I'll know more about Ruby and it won't seem like such a big deal. Thanks for watching. We're doing Boom next. My own pantheon god Stephen Moffat is back, pen in hand, ready to beg my forgiveness for giving me hell bent. If you want to see that review, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. What did you think of the episode? I want to know. Talk to me. I'm very lonely. Till next time, see ya.